What's up, everybody? I have my phone down here, making sure that I can hear us because this is the first time we're doing YouTube Live again. And so tonight we have a special guest. We have Jonathan Allsop, who will introduce himself a little bit later once we get into the show. But he's going to talk to us about his role in the beverage industry. And we're going to take a look at the impact of dry January and the non alcoholic market. And then just look ahead to 2025 and see, what we think the future holds for the beverage industry. So, Allsop, nice to see you.
Howdy, hi.
Do you want to give a quick introduction of yourself? You're a multi hyphenate, so a little introduction as it relates to the bev industry, but then also a little bit about you.
Yeah, absolutely. We'll start with the alcohol part. I promise I didn't start drinking yet. So yes, my name is Jonathan. I am currently a category insights manager for a wine company called Aveline. Cameron Diaz is actually one of the founders. Catherine Powers is another one. Really doing a lot of revolutionary work within the industry, being organic wine, really sustainability, and a lot of clarity and transparency, which really, really does come through in like the branding and the wine. So I really enjoy being there. I just hit my 1 year anniversary with them. I've been able to learn a lot about wine with classes, and just working in the industry. So like that's been great. I'm also an actor. So I do a lot of theater work in Chicago and slash the Midwest. I'm part of SAG, so I've done some feature films and some commercial stuff. And I'm also a content creator working on some YouTube content where I just give my opinion about many of things, which I love doing.
That's awesome. I can't wait to hear like a little bit more about the wine and just you have some insight into the industry that's been fun to hear. And I think that will definitely kind of shape our conversation going forward when we're looking at 2025, but also as we look back into dry January and this kind of new wave uh, of how people are consuming and what people are consuming. Uh, Chris, what are you drinking? We haven't heard from you yet, so we're going to start with you.
All right. Well, I have a barrel-aged saison from, it's called Above and Below. It's from Forest in Maine.
Mm,
We can get that in here. It is brewed with Deer Creek barley and spelt, roasted purple sweet potatoes, and heirloom squashes from taproom to farm. It is it's using forage yeast culture and aged in wine barrels. So appropriate for our guest today is a wine barrel aged saison. And ooh, what percentage of this? This is 5.2%, so easy drinking.
nice. I was hoping for some like purple color to it. I was really hoping that would like come out a little bit more.
Well, they don't say what kind of wine barrels, but oh, it's really good. It is like a classic saison because it's like barrel aged, it's going towards like farmhouse
Hmm.
and like funk. But it's really easy going. It's really good. I'm not like usually big on these types of beers, but this one's really, really balanced. It's not overly tart. I'd probably give this like a 4.25.
Chris, I'm going to start calling you a saison because I think you're very easygoing.
I also
I
think you're four
appreciate
to
that.
five.
Out of five, or
Baby, always out of five.
thank you, Alsop. I'll take the compliment.
um, Also, what are you drinking? I think this is a good transition from his saison aged in wine barrels to what you might be drinking.
Yeah, to actually just having a little wine, absolutely. Definitely drinking some of the brand. The Pinot Noir that we have is really, really good. Very like well-bodied and like really good fruit aromas and stuff like that. So just having a glass of that.
Hey, did we try that when you were here at all?
Hmm.
I'm trying to remember all that we've had from.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure we had the Pinot and the Rosé maybe,
Yeah,
and the white blend.
think we grabbed the rosé when we
Yeah.
went back to Total Wine the next time you were over. Yeah,
Yeah,
that's
that
fun.
sounds right.
It's hard to come by in PA though,
Well, yeah, well, PA finding anything in PA is ridiculous. We're starting to get more distribution. We have few customer meetings coming up. So fingers crossed that those go well. But yeah,
nice. I am drinking from, oh god, Wild Air Beer Works. It's State of Grace. It's a hoppy pilsner. Of course, I am doing the blurred background, so this is gonna
There
be
you go.
nice. No, you nailed it.
right. It does not give you much about it. Wild Air is out of Asbury Park, New Jersey. It's sitting at a 4.8, and recently I've been seeing them a lot at the different bottle bars and the beer shops that I go to, and they've had some really nice, like crisp uh, beers. I think we even got like a smoked beer from them too. That was pretty good.
Mm. And this is a more traditional pilsner
Yep,
in
this is
taste.
it's a hoppy pilsner, so this is actually fun as we go to talk about beverage later, and especially about accessibility and like how do you make beers that are approachable. I find hoppy pilsners to be a very good gateway to IPAs because you have this pilsner beer that's usually light and very easygoing beer. And a lot of the times when people are drinking IPAs, the issue is the bitterness, the hoppiness that comes out of it, and it can be a lot for somebody. And I always found that my first hoppy pilsner was with Dock Street, and as soon as I drank it, I was like, "Oh, this is IPA light. This is incredible. This is how I would introduce somebody to IPAs." Uh, and I'm gonna try not to jump back and forth between topics because I want to get back. I want to get into the impact of dry January, uh, but yeah, Allsop, you didn't necessarily like beer right away. You were a cider guy when we were out trying new places together. And how did you find yourself liking beer? But then also, what is your like approach to liking wine and introducing people to wine?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of it is at least one trying the right thing first to make an impression. Like the first time I took a sip of a beer, it was probably a very, very cheap beer. And I don't mean like a Bud Light. I mean like a Hams, like like something just like gutter sewer water. We're just like this is nasty. The first time I sipped the wine, it was just a sip from like my grandma's glass, and it just tasted like spoiled grape juice. Now, granted, that could have been like me younger with taste buds at the time, but I genuinely feel like it just I wasn't able to consume something of a certain quality, and because of that, that had negative attributes that lasted for a while. So for the beer part, the cider, the reason I got a cider was by accident. My friend got it for me. I didn't want to be rude, so I tried it. And I was like, oh, this actually tastes pretty good. Like I was like, oh, this is just like a kind of like spicy apple juice. Keep in mind you came from a Christian boy that was like, I will not touch the liquor. So but after doing that, and then I don't remember exactly when, but just trying a few things here and there, but just very lightly. I got to do a Budweiser tour a few years ago, and it wasn't as much as like, oh God, it's Budweiser. It was so good. That's not the case. Not to say that it was bad. It just was not the thing that shook the world. It was seeing the process and everything that goes into it. And then when you start to get exposed to craft brewers, they're like, here's how we do this on a local scale that has more impact and how we can change flavors and seasonality and doing things like where it's very much more innovative and like that part and like the quickness of how that can move was just very, very intriguing. Very similar to wine, where it's like, as I got into it more and I learned more about it, I started to have the vocabulary and the appreciation to really be able to try different things and like enjoy it.
Nice. You just recently passed a wine test too, didn't you?
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
My certificate's right there on the chair.
Which certificate is that?
It's the W set, so it's the wine spirits educational training. I'm pretty sure that's what those three letters stand for. But it's a national organization in which you can take courses for wine and spirits. And there's four different levels. And I just did the level one, which is just an intro. How do you make wine? What are the regions it comes from? What's the process look like? And what are the big varietals of wine that you could encounter?
Nice. That's awesome. No, congratulations on that. I wanted to make sure that
Yes, congratulations.
yeah,
Thanks.
that's
I
one of
was a
those
little
things that
nervous for the
This
test.
is yeah, this is your qualifications portion of the episode where we have to get you qualified as an
I have to
expert
put that on my
first.
LinkedIn. I forgot.
you forgot to put
She
it
is well
in. I would have been on
educated.
that so fast.
Like as you're getting the certificate,
Right,
just
right. Finish
Right.
on
the
your
exam.
phone.
Finish the exam. I passed that. um. So as we transition to the first segment of today's episode, we just finished January. It's what 5, 6 days into February. 6 days into February. So a lot of people have been adopting dry January. Lately it's been something that's becoming more and more popular. Last year I participated in moistish January. I didn't drink all
Ugh.
the time, but I had a little every once in a while. Here, what I would do is I would borrow from other days of the year that I knew I wasn't going to drink, and
Not
so.
that video nonsense you sent me.
But we've seen this kind of change the way breweries even approach things. The biggest name obviously is Athletic Brewing that really popularized non-alcoholic beer. Sam Adams has stuff. Sierra Nevada has stuff. Everybody seems to be jumping on.
Hmm.
And even breweries that have come out even as little as a year ago saying, this is why we don't do it because it costs a lot, are introducing their non-alcoholic beers. I think yesterday Love City just
Love
announced that they
City, yeah.
have a non-alcoholic beer, which they were the big one saying like, hey, it just costs too much, and now they have one, which is really incredible. But I think unlike seltzers, we saw a hard seltzer like craze for a second, and that kind of died down. What I thought was relatively quick. We're seeing this kind of staying. So how has dry January changed the way people consume alcohol? I think is the question. Do you think it
Mm.
has? That's for anybody, open ended.
Well, we'll go with the qualified person first.
Um, well, I think it's in two parts, right? Like, first thing you have to consider is that when you're looking at retail sales that are happening in Q4, so like October, November, December, in particular December, that's when the highest volume's coming out. You're having a high amount of consumption in that last week through Christmas and then through New Year's, but primarily right before Christmas. And so either the purchasing rate just plummets down. So I think people are already sitting on a bunch of alcohol coming out of a big time frame where you're just drinking consistently. So it makes sense from a sales standpoint that the numbers will be down. In terms of it also just being a trend, like so recently, I think the number is 823 million, if I remember correctly, of non-alcoholic sales. So that includes wine, beers, spirits. And it's up 27% versus a year ago. If you're looking at that versus 2 years ago, it is a very consistent trend. So it's one of those things like, yeah, it is here to stay. I'm not surprised that they said it was expensive to produce and they're doing it now because
Mhm.
what it is it's incremental to the category, right? So if you're a beer drinker, you're probably still going to be drinking beer even outside of dry January. But if you're a person that you've gone sober, but you still want the social aspect, you want to drink, but you just don't want to drink as much. Now people are realizing, oh, there are alternatives. I don't just have to go to the bar and I have to get a drink, right? I'm at a bar. I might be required to get a drink, but that doesn't mean that I have to consume alcohol. It doesn't mean that I have to have a soda. And people are really catching on to like there is a big market for that, even for people that like beers. Like every so often, I'll like throw in a non-alcoholic beer because I'm like, we had three, let's give a little break, a little taster. And then, you kind of go back into it. Um, And it's a lot easier in particular to do that with beer because changing a flavor profile from 5% alcohol, 4 or 5%, is a lot easier to do than in wine, where it's like 12 to 15%. Doing that in wine is very difficult, which is why they are all sugar water. But it's a lot easier to get it done with beer, but the quality of it
Hmm.
is a lot higher.
That's a great point about the alcohol contents because you think about like alcohol does have a clear taste and it obviously
Mhm.
adds like this, I would call it like a chemical bitterness to whatever you're drinking. And then like in the case of beer, and I don't know how it's done in wine, but if you think about like in beer, it's just a different strain that produces less alcohol. And so it's like, and because of it's a small increment down, it's the process isn't altered as much as probably for like a distilled spirit, I would imagine. And even distilled stuff or wine, I to get it down under whatever percentage, it's got to be like a less than like a 0.5% or something to be considered non-alcoholic. Is that
Yeah, I
right?
think less than 1%.
Less than
Yeah,
1%.
it's
So that's like a
usually
huge,
0.5.
okay. Yeah, so instead of dropping 4% or 5%, you have to reduce an order of magnitude out with wine. So that's a much bigger ask. Uh, but and also I feel like in with beer, there's so much other stuff in beer.
Hmm.
Like beer is such a heavier,
Flavor
uh,
profile, like
yeah, it's
through
like
the wazoo. Absolutely.
the alcohol is always secondary with beer in terms of a taste. And so like the real flavors come from the sugars themselves being cooked already. So it's just like it's just an easier ask, I think, than something with like a wine. So that's definitely a great point. And now that we've had this discussion, I was actually in September at the Lancaster Beer Festival, and I was speaking with a guy who home brews. He he also is like the assistant brewer at Mad Chef Brewing in Lancaster,
What's his name?
and he was Tyler
We gotta love a
Chip
good
Tooth
Tyler.
Tyler
Well,
who's
Chip to Tyler,
yeah Chip
as you
Tooth
know.
Chip
and
Tooth Tyler.
he actually brought up the fact that non-alcoholic is like becoming this big thing. Like the market share has,
It's
as you
bringing in
said,
new people.
yeah, it's bringing in new people, and I think you're right. The big reason it should stay is because like with like a seltzer, like Tyler said, it's kind of waned. It's because you're not really changing like the aspect of how you enjoy your social time with a seltzer. It's just I like this drink versus I don't like this drink. Whereas with a non-alcoholic, there's a utility to it in a social setting where you can stay out a little longer and you can monitor your intake much better while still having something in your hand because I feel like a lot of times when you're in a social setting, you just need the thing in your
It's the
hand and
psychology part.
exactly. So it's like you can still have that thing in your hand if you're a beer drinker, you can still have that like uh that grainy carbonated taste without it being a soda, like you said, and you're still able to participate, in the social atmosphere that you're in. So I do think it's a very interesting like thought idea, and I think it has a lot of utility and a lot of positive sides to it, despite the costs.
Yeah, I think we would all agree then that like this is probably something that's here to stay in beverage, right? Like
Yeah.
this is
I think
more
the
than
size of it will change, similar to seltzers, where it's like they got so big and then it was a big plummet. It's seltzers aren't going away. The market is just now more stabilized to where it probably will continue to be for the next X amount
Tell
of
that to
time.
two robbers.
they completely ditched it. That was very interesting. They were the seltzer
If you
movement.
relate to the game, it's going to be a three like player market. It's going to be White Claw, it's going to be Vizzy, and it's going to be like one other player for the long term.
It's crazy though. They had it. They were the Philadelphia one. Like and they had a great spot here in Fishtown, and a great product to be completely honest too. And then they were just like, we're gonna do canned cocktails now. We're done.
Which are also very hot right now. Ready to drink is like what's saving spirits.
Interesting.
Truth.
So maybe that will bring us into the next point then too. Let's take a look at industry opportunities for 2025. What areas of the beverage industry need the most innovation? How about that? Let's start with that.
Mm. That's hard, right? So, like, innovation is marked in two ways, as I was giving in my presentation today, um, which will be line extensions, right? Different flavors from X brands, but also different pack types, right? So, like, for example, with wine, there's a thing called beatbox, which is not only a wine cocktails, right? It's a different way to think about wine, but it's also in this plastic box where you can just kind of drink it like a coconut water. Um, and so that has become very popular, right? When you think about like as with millennials and the experiences, a lot of these group gatherings that are happening, it's a lot easier to be like, what can I just throw in my bag? Sometimes bringing a big wine bottle, it doesn't necessarily feel like it's right. So it makes sense that those are things that are growing. I think for beer, the right, the hard part for beer, I think innovation will continue to be in line extensions like flavor opportunities. But that's basically doing what craft beer is doing, but they just need to get the distribution amongst major retailers at a local level, which with capitalism, we'll see. Which is why I said that. Wine, it's a lot of it is pack type differentiation, just finding different ways in which you can consume it that is convenient for the consumer. And for spirits, it really is that kind of ready to drink cocktail, right? That is the thing. Like the growth for that is truly like very, very stunning. And that is also kind of in a way, not only a pack type, but also a consumption change as well.
So for me, it sounds
Mm.
like the grab and go ability of any beverage is what's really like helps push it forward, right? Because like that's something that beer's
Mhm.
always had, I think,
Right.
above
And
everything
always
was
will
like
have.
it's an especially when they became cans, like can throw it here, we're good. You're done with it, squish it. It becomes small and even more compact. If we don't want to just throw it off to the side and we want to like get rid of it responsibly, it still is not taking up a lot of space, right? Whereas bottles,
Mhm.
where now you got this glass thing that you're walking around with. Maybe you could find a fun way to batch cocktail something to go, but that still was, is it tight? Is it not going to spill? But
Mhm.
as that's
And the work
changed,
to make the cocktail.
right? And so as that's changed, it kind of leveled out that like playing field. It seems like from what I'm
Mhm.
hearing.
Yeah, yeah, I would agree. I think that's spot on.
Cool, that's interesting. Chris, any thoughts?
I agree with the like with seeing the surge of batch cocktail stuff. Um, didn't even realize that was a thing until one day, like you go into the liquor store and there's just cans and
Yeah.
cans or small
Margarita,
bottles.
margarita, margarita.
8 million types of margaritas, 8 million types of like mules,
Yeah,
you
Beals was
know,
big, yeah.
or like hard teas. Like back in my day, you had twisted tea and you had not your
Four
father's.
locos.
Well, barely in Pennsylvania.
So here's my question about like looking towards the future of 2025. Let's talk about sustainability and or like in the organic movement, right? I think this really will. I think Allsop has a lot to say about that, considering the brand that you're working with. For I think one of the big things with beer has always been like the waste, the amount of waste that it produces, and I feel like everyone when they're talking about innovation is trying to figure out new and better ways to reduce the not only the cost for themselves but also to make it a environmentally like friendlier process. Sierra Nevada does a lot to get more power, water, like just do it greener. Um, where do we think sustainability and the like kind of organic movement has a role in 2025 and maybe even as we continue going on with beverage?
also want to pin in that for you, Chris and Tyler, if you've noticed any climate change issues that have been affecting beer in particular.
Yeah, hops.
Mm.
Yeah.
Hops.
Everything.
Hops is the big one. Well,
Like,
hops
and
is the
in what
biggest
way? How
one.
does it,
So
Crops, right?
right,
I
so
think.
like just
there's
the yield?
there's a
Yeah,
hop
crop
farm
yield.
in Berks County, Fawn Hill Hop Farm, and we had the opportunity to talk to them about everything, and they do it very organically. They grow it right there in the backyard, and they don't add anything to it to help it grow better. But one of the things you do is you kind of predict what the weather is going to be in terms of how much you water it, how much you don't water it, how it's shaded when it's planted, and the unreliable, like you're not reliably predicting this anymore, and it's getting really hot in moments and really wet in other moments when it's not necessarily how it should be or how history has shown. And so they're not yielding as much product, or the product isn't as good because they might be overwatering it, and that just kind of floods it out, and or they're not giving it enough, and now everything's just fried, and so they're picking it sooner, and it's smaller. It's not like becoming as good of a like yield of product. So that's just one way you've seen it affecting like hop farms, and that aren't these huge like contained like under like sheds where they can control heat, light, and all of that kind of stuff. So for smaller
Mhm.
farmers too, keeping it as craft can be, right? That's definitely a problem.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
especially even if you like when reading the Sierra
Mhm.
Nevada book, like he talks extensively about like the way that the hops affect the beer industry, the way they affect the system. You have to kind of buy it. You can buy ahead, and if there's a bad year, then everyone's behind, and it's just a lot of it's just probably the one thing that's like very economics driven and environmentally driven. Um, and it's also dependent upon the fact that like America loves hoppy beers, right? It's something that's so forward. It's not just
Mm.
another ingredient. Whereas
Mhm.
like the barley yield's probably an issue as well, right? But it's less of the main ingredient in a lot of these beers, so it's less of an issue.
Yeah, heard.
And that's
And
not
then
even,
obviously water.
and so that's just purely on like a climate change thing. We're not even going to talk about how the tariffs are going to affect the craft beer industry
Oh,
yet.
no, 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 no. Yeah, because I've seen the numbers. Yeah,
Tell
'cause
tell us. Tell us.
imports in the two parts of beer that are doing well are imports and then super premium price, so like a kind of elevated price point of beers. And those are going to be fine. Domestic beers are down like 6%. Um, the imports, though, are the parts that's up, growing, and also priced at a premium. So it's what's providing some health to the beer category. But if we have tariffs and then we don't really have the imports, I don't think domestic is actually going to pick up all that slack. And even if it was units for units, because one is priced higher, you're still losing dollar value. That's just the math.
And math's gonna math.
The math is going to math.
God, that's
So
interesting.
bleak is what we're hearing.
You said what?
I said bleak. I hear bleak.
Bleak. Yeah, so drink up while you can. Yeah.
Can you talk about the talk about Abilene for a little bit? I want to hear more about it's organic wine, or am I not
Yeah.
making that up? I'm not making
Or
that up.
actually,
Okay.
yeah, in case anyone is watching, technically we have to say, because the US is stupid, it's made with organic grapes.
Mm.
But we can't say that it is organic wine, but it's organic wine.
It's not organic
Um,
wine, but it.
we can come on. Okay.
So why
Yeah,
why
but
can't
there's
you say that?
I'm trying to remember. I think it's because there are low occurring natural sulfites that are in the wine, and so you would have to have no sulfites, but if you have no sulfites, that's actually not good for the preservation of the wine.
I was gonna say
Um,
that's a preservative.
right. Um, and right, and that's sometimes the harder part with organic stuff in general, right? Like, yes, you want it to be clean, but also there's the idea of like, well, we also don't want waste because if these things are getting degrading a lot faster, right? Which is why we made preservatives in the first place, right? So there's a balance of things, friends. All things need balance. Not to quote Thanos, who is certainly a villain. I was going to say, though, with on the wine side, because of the process in which grapes are grown and like the way that they grow, it turns like once it has the water and the sugars in it, it then starts to turn the sugars into alcohol. So depending when you pick it off, it's a combination of sugar and alcohol. If you wait long enough, then you have a grape that is majority alcohol, or with zero sugar or like very low sugar. And then so it's very interesting now because of climate change and things have become a lot hotter and the temperature fluctuations have been a lot bigger. Um, Wine has become more alcoholic over time. So you look at some vineyards that are in like Napa and stuff, and they're like, oh, yeah, this used to be an 11%, and now it's like 12.5. Like it's been, and over keep in mind, I think that's over the course of like 2 to 3 decades, but like still seeing that kind of like change happen over
I
what.
mean, but considering there's no like that's with no other changes.
Right, right. And at like a family vineyard that has the same plot that's been producing for X time, they didn't see it before. It's not like, oh
Mhm.
yeah, and 30 years ago it was like that. No, they were like, no, 30 years ago it was still 11%. And now it is certainly like creeped up. So it is definitely showing and coming through. Um, yeah, but like at least for the Aveline side, the thing I really appreciate is like a lot of wine gets caught, or people that are involved in wine heavily get caught up in the vintage of it, right? I think we like
Mhm.
that happens in craft beer for in a different way. But it's like,
Sure
or
does.
vintage. And where does this happen? And probably it's like some people just like to consume wine. They know it's like I like a Cabernet, I like a Sauvignon Blanc,
Mm.
and right, and maybe not getting caught up in the vintages as much as providing a good quality, consistent wine. So like the partners that we have are not only just about like doing as sustainable kind of farming practices as we can, but also just focus on having that no sugar, the low sulfites, and made with the organic grapes, right? It's like you want a clean ingredient list. You're just getting the compliments of the wines and the aromas that are fresh within it. So you're getting this very crisp experience. But on top of that, we also cannot technically say this, but like you really don't feel it the next day. Wine headaches are
Mm.
real, like with the amount of sugars that you have, or just because sometimes the high alcohol percentages and stuff with in combination with that, especially with when things have like high sulfites, but like the low sulfites, the no sugar, the clean ingredient list with no extra chemicals, like you really can wake up the next day and like I feel great even if I had several glasses. It's beautiful.
Nice pitch.
Really, it's true. I wouldn't have said it if it wasn't true. I've been like, next topic.
One thing we can always rely on is you being 100.
No,
Um,
that part.
so let's take a look at this. Since you have numbers and everything like that, I don't know if these are the numbers that you might be able to see, but diversity in ownership and representation. Have we seen any progress, in the last couple of years? Do we think we're going to see
Um,
more progress?
oh, it's hard. I don't have as much access into it. It's hard because I'm like the main company that was really changing things in wine. I shouldn't say the main company. A big company you think about is like Black Girl Magic Wine.
Yep, first one I thought of.
Yep, yep. Not going well. It's actually going. Don't laugh, Chris. I mean, it's hard. I mean, in wine, the industry has been changing, right? Everyone's trying to figure it out. And I know that they've just had some challenges, I think, with like finding the right person to market their wines. I don't know if there's been any logistical issues that they may have went through and stuff. But they've really had a big amount of losses, which sucks because, right, not only was it just like when we talk about diversity, I'm like, we had Black women doing wine, and it doesn't mean they're not going away. I know they hired a new CMO, I believe. So, like, hopefully, with that, they are going to be able to help have a resurgence in market. But it was one of those things where it's like this was a very key player, and it was kind of sad to see while I was working last year and reviewing the data, just see the decline. But they're working to figure it out, and I really hope they do. I think a lot of people in the industry are really rooting for them.
I mean, their price point doesn't even seem that bad. Like I was just quick looking that up, at least for like the wine and spirits around here.
Mm-mm.
Because I was having like a guilt moment earlier when I was thinking about it. I was just like, it's not like I'm buying wine often, but when I am, I'm not buying their wine, and I feel like that's already a mistake on one step of it.
Issa Rae's though, her Prosecco is doing pretty well. It's good.
I didn't know
There
about
you
that.
go.
I have to say I haven't been paying that much attention over there. What's
Hers
her?
is very new. It's less than a year old.
Okay, I feel better now because
Yeah.
I get onto things late. So
Yeah, same.
okay, I'll be keeping an eye out for that. Thank you for putting me onto that. Um,
Got you.
as far as the beer side is concerned, in terms of diversity, representation, all that type of stuff, I think when we first got into it, it was a very intriguing and a very we couldn't find a lot of it. Then we found a community. Then we found festivals, and then we were in a lot of rooms as well, and hearing a lot of things that got you like really inspired. I will say I don't know if it's just because it's on the cuffs of everything that's happening politically now as well, but I don't feel that same sort of optimism and inspiration that I
Yeah.
once did. I felt like even locally, before I would go into all these bottle shops, and Two Locals was there all the time. It was so easy to get my hands on. And I spent the last week going to different places. I outside of actually going to the place, and I couldn't find their beer that I wanted to buy. And I think that's I don't know if
That's
it's a
surprising.
blessing, but it's weird not to be able to have that access to it anymore. And it's already hard enough because again, outside of the Black Girl Magic with the wine, I wouldn't be able to tell you another one besides the Issa Rae one right now. So I think that's hard in this industry, going into a place and knowing what to get to kind of support your community, especially in like Black History Month, where you really want to do something like that. Not that we shouldn't be doing it all the time, but especially so this month.
Right. Right. It's a good time to try. Right. And then, like, it's the thing where it's like, you could try, you want to support black business. If you go there and you're like, you know what, this is nasty. Hey, at least you tried. But like, it's the idea of like, I should be giving you the same opportunity that I would be anyone else. And I should be hyper focused on you because I understand the barriers that you're facing. Right. And like, if someone doesn't rise to the occasion, that's a different story, but you have to give them the opportunity to.
Exactly. I don't know how many breweries we talk about that are just like we went wasn't for us yet. We'll come back, revisit it in a year or two, hopefully, and then see how that goes. So
Yeah, let them cook. Give people the chance to be able to grow and learn, unless they're rude. And then I'm like, you can eat that because ain't no way that's ever acceptable. 'Cause you gonna do your own like that? You understand?
100% agree. Could not agree more.
to move this along into our third segment here, the role of marketing and culture and beverage trends. Um, what does the role of social media, role of social media and influencer culture have going forward in 2025? How do I think this is piggybacking off of this last conversation, right? What is the role of social media into everything beverage, especially with culture?
It's great, right? Like before, I think about how you used to sit and watch TV and you'd have these infomercials like the turbo cooker and all these things. And then you're like, okay, cool. I'm watching this 30-minute thing. I'm watching people try it. Okay, cool. This feels good. But how long is that? But how engaging is that as well? And it's nice when there's someone that you follow and they're like, hey, I tried this. I tried this, right? You have selection on the kind of people that you follow. and then you can develop a like, oh, you know what? We have some like I feel like on YouTube, there's people I watch for commentary on Real Housewives content. There's one person I was like, oh, you're not bad. You're good at what you do. She has a bunch of followers, less than the other person I really like. But I'm like, I don't like the way that you view things, but I like the way you view things. And so if I were to go on someone's opinion, I'm going to lean towards this person and this person. But the great part is I have the option to, and I have the accessibility to. So it's going to be a huge key player. The smart brands are the brands that are finding ways to work with influencers, in addition to having their own social media marketing.
Chris, your thoughts on social media?
What's that? No. As someone who does not spend a lot of time on social media.
Blessed be.
Yeah. You know, I do think about how when I do see ads, when I do see like engagement with brands, how it is definitely like geared more towards, the online community at this point as well. Like, and it does seem like for the most part, it is engaged with like the younger crowd. And maybe that's because like generally like the aesthetic online is generally just younger at this point
Mm.
and engage and towards like trying to pull those younger people in to things. Like I feel like there's definitely if it's something like that's geared towards our age group, it's like so obviously geared towards our age group to the point where it's almost like self-aware in a sense. And I feel like I don't know what that is, but I do think that it's definitely like a lot more of like you have to kind of trick the audience into being engaged at this point as well, just because of how the internet is these days, how everything is so quick, there's so much content. Like, how do you capture someone's attention so quickly, or how do you fold it into what other people are watching? Um,
Hmm.
and so I just And then, of course, obviously, TV ads and TV spots aren't really doing it anymore for that type of thing. Like, that's not really going to get you the full audience you need, I feel like. And I don't know, maybe I could be wrong by that, but I feel like TV's down so much. Like, the traditional ad isn't really going to do it. So you almost fold it into sponsorships with certain people, and there's got to be a name behind it, and there's got to be some type of name recognition, either they're with the company or just a sponsorship. But I feel like that's what I've seen. It's got to be geared more with a person with a face towards a particular group of people. Um, which again makes it harder for like the little guy to compete because you don't have money to throw at big names, you don't have money to throw at these types of things. Um, which
Imagine me trying to audition for the role and you want fucking Michael B. Jordan. Shit.
I mean, you got a chance.
I better.
I don't know. I keep seeing people. I'm just like, damn, that looks like Allsop. I keep sending you them. I don't know. I feel like something like a football player role is in your future because it keeps being them football players. I'm like, damn, that kind of looks like Allsop.
Plus, I'll be the tight end.
Chris, I'm gonna send you them. I'll send you the pictures.
I don't even know if a tight end is like jacked or skinny. I just know it was a good joke.
um, So speaking of like kind of that tricking you into it, the influencer and the more personal thing, I definitely see 2025 having more of those. I think at a point oh, join me as I go and I check out this brewery like videos were a little more authentic before, whereas now you're seeing people pay for this as
Mhm.
a service now, right? So
Hmm.
they're still fun. They're still good like content because they are showing you different places and you are getting to see like the big food reveals, beer reveals, all that. That is fun. Um, but it then also leads into I think a conversation Chris and I have had a couple of times. The experience, being a very key point. So how these breweries before could be these open warehouses and that's it. You just come in, you have a beer, you sit on a cold chair, and you enjoy the beer, and you're out. Versus now, you have the photo opportunities. You have The music has to be right, the entertainment has to be right, the whole visual appeal, how it feels to enter it. All these things are playing a bigger point into it. And talking about TV ads, I think you got to create this feeling, this experience can be at home, but you have to create that environment around it. And I think a brand that did something very good at how do you have this experience at home was Folgers Coffee. Was
Yeah.
you created this cabin-esque, lake-esque feeling, like you have a cup of Folgers and you're out in the wilderness and you're serene, right? Even if you're in a middle of Manhattan, right? Like that's what you should feel with Folgers in your cup, right?
Yeah, and
Um
Wade Brady's there.
but I think if you can create that with influences, if you can create a feeling of this is the experience that you can have even when you're not going out, even when you're just consuming this at home, I think that's a big opportunity, is creating the, you know, what does this beverage in your hand mean? People argue about Miller Lite, Coors Light, Bud Light, and like the difference between these things. So it's just like a football team in a way too. If you can convince people to be team enter craft beer, I think that can go a long way in the future. Create conferences, create divisions for for,
The
for
macro
craft beer.
conference. Yeah,
Why
I
why
like
shouldn't
that
you be a
idea.
fan of a PA
Fantasy
brewery
team.
in California?
Exactly. Absolutely. 100% agree. Although I will say that between Miller Coors and Bud, I can tell the difference, and it is a stark difference
I
between all
I
three.
do have a video to release at some point of him telling the difference. It is quite incredible.
I believe
Uh,
it.
none of them are better or worse than each other. They're just all differently bad. So whoever whoever fights over all three of those, you're all bad,
I
just
think
in different ways.
I think we have a good 5-10 minutes tops left into here, and there's one or two more questions I think we should get into, or talking points. How do you think brands can market to younger, more mindful consumers? I think that will be a big way of really building out a base for some of these industries if they can figure this out. Like non-alcoholic kind of seems to be doing.
I do think that's a good point in terms of like pushing the alternatives. I feel like our younger generations are kind of like moving away from like in general are moving away from like going heavily into a vice as like a large swath of the generation. Like
Like us.
mindfulness is, yeah, I feel like mindfulness is a bigger part of younger people nowadays in many aspects of life, more so than it might have been when we were younger, like in our 20s. And then the generations before us, obviously, because obviously I feel like the information and knowledge around your health and your long-term health is growing. Um, people, young people younger and younger are able to understand that a little more at a younger age and are able to apply that a little more and care about that a little more. So I feel like pushing the non-alcoholic side of things probably would be a good strategy. Um, and kind of also, again, like I was saying, it like the social media aspect of advertisement has always skewed younger. I feel like the creativity has to be upped every time because as much as we're talking about, tricking people into, viewing and what's a glorified advertisement, I feel like the longer we go, the more people are privy to those kinds of things. And I know, and I at least know for myself, like sometimes when you click on something and it's so obviously an advertisement, it turns you off to it right away. You don't even want to hear it out, whether it's a legitimate like review of something or not, if it's like so obvious that you're just being paid to do this or it's an advertisement, like I feel like that would turn people off and can backfire. So you got to find a way to be more natural with it, a little more organic, and then really push like the alternatives to, the non-alcoholic alternatives, I think.
I agree. When you look at Gen Z, like a lot of them are going to be less drinkers. Um, but some of them are still still a good portion of them are going to be drinkers. So I
Sure.
think to what Chris said, like, yeah, you're actually going to be a successful brand. It'll be in your best interest so you can capture as much as this upcoming set of drinkers to capture as many of them as you can to have that non-alcoholic option. This will be less for, I think, a brand unless a brand does a partnership. But like, I shouldn't say obviously, THC drinks have also become very, very popular as another way of like, I want to feel a buzz, but I don't want to
Mm.
rely on that coming from alcohol, right? So that's another space in which there's a lot of growth. There's a brand that's very interesting called XXL. It tastes like cough syrup. It is basically like a fortified wine. It's like a Moscato, and it's like 17 or 18. It's like a very high percentage, but it's been selling like crazy and
Mm.
it really is marketed more towards this kind of Gen Z population. And I'm like, yeah, there's a world in which they're like, give me something strong and I don't need much of it, but I can then just kind of like go.
Oh,
But something
Have they
that's
not
not,
heard of
not still
Campari?
hard liquor.
oh, okay. Hold up. This is actually really interesting. This might take up the rest of the time. So, one, it sounds like Four Locos is making a comeback. Two,
Really?
no, no, no. That's what it
Mm-mm.
sounds like. It's. I just want something strong that's gonna get me there as quick as possible. That's Four Loco. Um, but it also, I don't know if you have noticed this or if you heard about this, but a lot of brands are going small, but they're going heavy on their alcohol content. Even Voodoo Ranger is
Mhm.
toying around with that. Is creating. I forget what they named it, but that was very much one of their strategies is to go these little cans. It's basically like I'm ready to go tailgate, or like I'm trying to go from the car to the game, and psh, oomph, and gone by the time I get to the front gate.
The culture of binge drinking is what's changing, not as much as drinking.
Yeah.
That's a good nuance there. Yeah, the whole point of it's quick and I'm not devoting a lot of time to this versus sitting there and just continuously going for a very long time.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Everyone's on the go, man. You got to be on the go. Although I will say I've also started seeing like 4 packs of like tall boys or like the stovepipe, the 19-ounce cans of beers,
Mhm.
Four.
even at the higher ABVs. So that's a new thing to me as well to see the 19-ounce cans in 4 packs. That's a little crazy to me.
All right.
I mean, how much of a game changer was that? Just grabbing a tall boy. I'd like go to a pregame. I'd just grab one of those. I'd milk that for the whole time, and then, like that was it. And maybe I get one or two drinks at the bar because we're getting there late. But like I could literally milk a tall boy instead of like, oh, I'd probably have three smaller ones.
True. I
Truth.
think we're seeing power hours turn into power 10 minutes. Um, as we wrap this up, and we'll kind of do this quickly. I think Allsop, you have things to do as you are a busy and much called upon person. Um, the original question was going to be predictions for the beverage industry in the next 5 years, but I think I'd rather focus on what do we personally want to see happen. Where do you want to see the beverage industry go?
Mm.
I think for me, easily, I kind of harped upon it earlier. It's all about the experience for me, and I mean that even to the degree of I want to feel good when I'm at the brewery, and I don't mean like I'm not looking to be pampered or anything, but I think it goes into it's a timely discussion. DEI. I think it's when I walk in, do I feel welcome? Do I feel like there's a space for me no matter what corner I am, or there is a corner for me to be in here, right? Is there a comfortable place to sit? Is there a place at the bar that allows me to like really talk and get to know what beer I'm drinking? When I look at the menu, is it approachable in a way of oh, if I am the beer nerd, it's giving me a lot of information that really helps me inform my decision. But if I'm a beer novice, it's not intimidating because there are other words there that really allow me to drink. Do I see people like me? Does this look like the community that was outside when I walked in? Like, I think that for me is where I want to see focus on going forward. You know, a brewery popping up is cool, and I'm going to be the guy that goes and checks it out because I love craft beer.
Right.
But after I enjoy the novelty of that, I am looking at them very intently. Of like, does this really fit the community? Does the community really seem to like gravitate towards this? Do I see people here that walked there, or do I see a bunch of different license plates and everybody from the community just kind of rolling their eyes as they walk by this place, right? That's a
Mm.
telling thing for me.
That's a great point. I wasn't thinking about that, but I tend to agree with you. And then that also kind of translates again to like distribution is a net loss for a lot of breweries, a lot of small breweries. And so it's in their best interest as well to create that welcoming environment, no matter where they're at, but particularly if they're in an area that is, we'll call it pre-gentrified, like the writings on the wall kind of thing. It would behoove you to kind of welcome the community in around you. And again, it can only help you to do so, to have people feel welcome when they come in, to feel like you're part of the neighborhood that you're in. Um, I just think would make for, the argument of more money, right? Because a lot of times the moral argument isn't falls on deaf ears. So I definitely agree with that. I hope this lagering trend continues with like a lot of places just getting into more like good lagers in the craft beer space. That would be like my selfish 2025 goal. More lagers,
I
more
agree
good
with that.
lagers.
I agree with the lager.
Here's to that.
Yeah. Well,
Um, and for me, it would just be like for wine not to be seen as like the stuffy old white man club. That wine can be very inclusive, and it is really a very fun thing when you give yourself the chance to explore it. And it appears in so many different ways, sweet to dry. And I didn't realize the vastness of that there was within wine, and I really wish, and I really hope that the industry, which is like that's the issue with wine is down now, is because it's been like too much of like, no, you're not welcome here. Now it's to be like, just kidding, come. But I really do hope that people do come and they do realize how great it is, and that it doesn't again become some kind of exclusive members thing.
I love that.
100% agree.
Um,
Because beer can be the same way.
very much so. Also, I just want to give you the opportunity to quick do any wrap ups of your final thoughts when it comes to wine, beer, the beverage industry as a whole. I just wanted to give you some time to shout out Abilene. Do you? Shout out your YouTube, please.
What's it be? Yeah, traveling wine. I think it's I think it's great. There's a bunch of different varietals. And again, it's very clean wine. So it's like wine and you know what's in it, is like what we say. So definitely give it a try if you see it in your market. Um, I would say, yes, follow me on YouTube. I do a bunch of videos. Most of them are me giving relationship advice to people. It's Jonathan Allsop. You can just search that on YouTube, and I have Reddit relationship advice, and that's great. And yeah, I mean the alcohol industry and just in general, like is down across beer, spirits, and wine. So I think everyone in all spaces of alcohol are just very interested in how can we turn these things around. Like I said, ready to drink has been a great way to start. Beer is already ready to drink, so that is not their solution. But I really do hope that there will be a turnaround trend. I think there's a great amount of like beauty and vastness that exists in all of those different segments of alcohol, and I really do wish all of them some forms, not all of them, but most of them a form of success. Oh, they can't all be good people.
Or most.
Bless.
Chris, do you have any final thoughts before we log off?
Thank you for having this conversation, this discussion. As always, it's
Mhm.
always a blast, and I was really interested to hear some of the insights that you have about the trends in the industry and what you're seeing, and obviously bring some discussion to the wine industry, and how that kind of intersects with beer. I always found that fascinating, just because craft beer culture is kind of like it's kind of like an offshoot of wine in a sense, where it's
Yeah,
like,
yeah, yeah, yeah.
no, we want to be like them, but we can't be like them, so we're gonna tr be like them, but over here, kind of.
Right, right,
So
right.
it's always interesting to see like what the actual industry at large for wine is doing, and how it's changed, because it's not something I think about at all, really.
That's real.
Sorry, it's like I don't think about them.
No, I mean, like most people don't. Most people are like, how are the sales, right? When they're like drinking a beer, right?
Yeah, even with beer, it's just like I don't think of like the actual industry and how it's as a whole trying to move or change, right?
Right.
Those types of pressures. As a consumer, you don't really think about that stuff all that often.
Hmm.
So,
Very true.
I gotta like recognize that I'm the weirdo that goes in and like just thinks about that like all
Yeah,
the
we
time.
know.
Like walking in, just
you
like
get
huh. It's like I
get a
walked
beer,
into
just
a
ask the
brewery.
bartender, so how are the sales go?
Right,
I
right,
walked
right.
into a brewery at the beach, and it was just like they had two options of beer to sell at like to go at their place. But if I went to the beer distributor next door, they had all of their varieties to go. And I'm just like,
Okay, but that's weird.
how is this like happening? Why wouldn't this be reversed, right? Like maybe one or
Right.
two here, but hey, we have more here. And I'm just like, this is weird. Anyway, thank you so much for for joining us tonight. The goal is to bring in somebody new every month to talk about beer, wine, whatever. But just to kind of have a little more dedicated conversations than what we usually do on our lives. It's fun to get back to this, and it was an easy choice to have you come in and do this with us, not just because of your involvement in the industry, just because we love you.
Oh, and I love you guys.
So keep an eye out for that on a monthly basis, but every other week. Until then, we'll be going live on Instagram to talk about whatever. Probably football next week. In 2 weeks. So
Or not.
if you want to see what happens with the Super Bowl too, and how we feel about it, hopefully Philly will be okay. Uh,
Right, that part. Damned if you
you
do,
won't
Yeah,
damned if you don't.
yeah.
you
Yeah,
won't hear
let's
this
get in the
often.
bunker. Get
You
in the
won't hear
bunker.
you won't hear this often out of my lips. So appreciate it now. Go Birds. All right, guys. Until next time.
Peace.
Peace.